The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead in Courtroom 4B as Marcus Chen straightened his $1,500 tie, a smirk playing across his lips. He glanced at the opposing table where an elderly black woman sat alone, her weathered hands resting on a battered leather briefcase that looked older than his career. "Your Honor," Marcus began, his voice dripping with condescension, "I find it almost amusing that we're even here today." "Mrs. Turner," he turned to face her, his eyes cold and calculating, "has wasted this court's valuable time with baseless accusations against Westbrook Development Corporation. Her so-called evidence, hearsay, feelings, and outdated notions about housing law that frankly belong in a museum." Rose Turner sat perfectly still, her silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, her brown eyes fixed on Marcus with an expression that revealed nothing. She wore a simple navy dress, no jewelry except a small golden pin shaped like scales. The pin caught the light as she breathed slowly, steadily, while Marcus continued his performance. Furthermore, Marcus strutted across the courtroom like a peacock, pulling out a tablet that probably cost more than Rose's monthly pension. Under Section 847C of the Fair Housing Amendment Act, the burden of proof requires demonstrable pattern evidence, which Mrs. Turner has spectacularly failed to provide. This case should never have made it past preliminary hearings. A few people in the gallery shifted uncomfortably. Marcus's associate, a young man named Tom Bradley, whispered something urgent, but Marcus waved him off with an irritated flick of his wrist. Judge Helen Morrison, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, leaned forward. "Mr. Chen, does your client deny refusing housing applications from qualified black families in the Riverside development?" "We deny any discrimination, Your Honor. Our selection process is entirely merit-based. If certain applicants happen to lack the financial credentials or references, that's simply economics, not racism." Marcus practically spat the last word, as if the very concept offended him. That's when Keisha Williams, a young attorney sitting in the back row, suddenly stood up. Her eyes had gone wide with recognition. "Your Honor, may I approach?" "Sit down, counselor. You're not part of these proceedings," Judge Morrison said firmly. Keisha remained standing, staring at Rose Turner with something like awe mixed with disbelief. "Your Honor, I really think you should know who bailiff. Please escort Ms. Williams out if she cannot maintain proper courtroom decorum," the judge interrupted, clearly annoyed. Keisha sat reluctantly, her hands gripping the bench in front of her, watching the scene unfold with mounting tension. Marcus turned back to Rose with theatrical pity. "Mrs. Turner, I understand you mean well. You probably attended a few community college law classes in your youth, read some books, watch some television dramas. But this is the real world. This is actual law. And in this real world, you're out of your depth. I suggest you withdraw this frivolous lawsuit before my firm countersues for legal fees and damages. Trust me," he leaned closer, lowering his voice to a stage whisper everyone could hear, "you don't want that fight." The silence that followed was electric. Rose Turner slowly reached for her briefcase. The clasps clicked open with sounds that echoed like gunshots in the quiet courtroom. She pulled out a manila folder, its edges worn soft with age, and stood with the grace of someone half her 72 years. "Mr. Chen," her voice was quiet but carried the weight of thunder, "you mentioned Section 847C of the Fair Housing Amendment Act." "Yes, which clearly states," Rose continued, her eyes now blazing with controlled fire, "that demonstrable pattern evidence includes, and I quote, any systematic documentation of disparate treatment based on protected characteristics, including but not limited to correspondence, internal memoranda, or testimony from individuals with direct knowledge of discriminatory intent." End quote. Marcus blinked. Those were the exact words of the statute. Word for word. "You seem surprised that an old woman knows the law, Mr. Chen. Perhaps you should be more surprised by this." Rose pulled out a document with an official seal, its paper yellowed but perfectly preserved. This is the original draft of the Fair Housing Amendment Act, submitted to the Congressional Committee on Civil Rights on March 14, 1994. And this, she held up another document, is the final version, signed into law on September 22, 1994. Judge Morrison leaned forward, squinting. Mrs. Turner, what exactly are you showing us? I'm showing the court that I wrote that law, Your Honor. Every single word of Section 847C that Mr. Chen just quoted to dismiss my case. My name is Rose Eleanor Turner, former senior legislative attorney for the Department of Justice, former special counsel to the Senate Judiciary Committee, and the primary author of the Fair Housing Amendment Act that Mr. Chen believes he understands so well. The courtroom erupted, Marcus's face drained of color. Tom Bradley dropped his pen. Keisha Williams was on her feet again, this time vindicated. That's what I was trying to tell you. That's Rose Turner. The Rose Turner. Judge Morrison banged her gavel. Order. Order in this court. Rose wasn't finished. She moved with purpose now, years of courtroom experience flowing back like muscle memory. Mr. Chen quoted Section 847C, but he conveniently ignored Section 847D, which I specifically designed to prevent exactly what Westbrook Development has been doing. When I drafted this legislation, I knew that companies would try to hide discrimination behind financial qualifications and selective reference checking. So I built in protections. She pulled out more documents, spreading them across the table like a royal flush. These are internal emails from Westbrook Development executives. Notice the date codes, the recipient lists, the subject lines. They reference, quote, maintaining neighborhood character and ensuring cultural fit. Those are code words, Mr. Chen. I've seen them 1,000 times in my 30-year career fighting housing discrimination. Marcus found his voice, though it trembled. How did you obtain confidential corporate communications? That's illegal search and seizure. Rose smiled for the first time, and it was sharp as a blade. I didn't obtain anything illegally. These were provided by Daniel Foster, former vice president of acquisitions at Westbrook, who grew tired of being asked to violate federal law. He's outside this courtroom right now, ready to testify under oath about the systematic exclusion of black families from Riverside Development. Your Honor, this is ambush tactics. Marcus protested, his composure completely shattered. No, Mr. Chen, Judge Morrison said, her voice hard as steel, this is justice. Mrs. Turner filed proper notice of witness testimony. Your firm simply didn't bother to investigate who you were dealing with. Counselor Turner, please continue. Rose opened another folder. When I wrote the Fair Housing Amendment Act, I included specific penalties for corporations that engage in systematic discrimination. I also included mandatory monitoring provisions and community restitution requirements. Westbrook Development violated every single protection I fought to establish. The 15 black families they rejected over the past 18 months all had superior credit scores, stable employment, and excellent references. They were rejected because of one thing only, the color of their skin. She turned to face Marcus directly. You mocked me for being old, for being out of touch, for not understanding modern law. But son, I built the foundation you're standing on. And you used my own creation to try to crush the very people I designed it to protect. Marcus sank into his chair, speechless. I have documentation proving discriminatory intent, witness testimony from inside the company, statistical analysis showing pattern evidence, and expert testimony from economists and civil rights specialists. Everything your Section 847C requires, and everything Section 847D was designed to uncover. Rose placed her hands on the table, leaning forward. I didn't retire from law because I was tired, Mr. Chen. I retired because I thought my work was done. I thought the protections I built would stand. But people like you, people who twist justice into a weapon for profit, you remind me why the fight never really ends. Judge Morrison reviewed the documents Rose had submitted, her expression growing more severe with each page. Mr. Chen, does Westbrook Development wish to present any defense to these allegations? Marcus looked at his notes, at his tablet, at the statute he quoted so confidently minutes ago. Everything he prepared was useless. Worse than useless, it was evidence of his own ignorance. We request a continuance to review denied. Judge Morrison cut him off. You had months to prepare. You chose to underestimate your opponent. Mrs. Turner, or should I say, Counselor Turner, your evidence is compelling and, frankly, damning. I'm ruling in favor of the plaintiffs. Westbrook Development is hereby ordered to cease discriminatory practices immediately, provide housing to all 15 rejected families at the original offered rates, pay punitive damages of $3 million to be distributed among the affected families, and submit to federal monitoring for 5 years. The gavel came down like thunder. Additionally, the judge continued, I'm referring this matter to the State Bar Association for investigation into whether Mr. Chen's conduct constitutes professional misconduct warranting disciplinary action. Marcus looked like he might be sick as the courtroom began to clear. Rose packed her documents carefully back into her old briefcase. Marcus approached slowly, his arrogance replaced by something that might have been shame. Mrs. Turner, I apologize. I was out of line. Rose studied him for a long moment. Mr. Chen, you're a brilliant lawyer. Anyone can see that. But brilliance without compassion is just cruelty with a law degree. You didn't see me as a person today. You saw an obstacle, something to be dismissed and destroyed. That's not just bad lawyering. That's a bad way to be human. I understand. Do you? Because understanding means change, and change is hard. It means checking your assumptions, questioning your prejudices, recognizing that the people you look down on might have lived entire lives of significance before you ever walked into a room. She closed her briefcase with a soft click. I'm not interested in your apology right now. I'm interested in whether you'll be different tomorrow than you were today. She turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Mr. Chen. Section 847G requires defendants found guilty of housing discrimination to fund legal education programs in underserved communities. Your firm will be writing a very large check to make sure the next generation of lawyers doesn't make your mistakes. 3 months later, Rose Turner stood in a community center in the Riverside development, watching 15 black families receive keys to their new homes. Children ran laughing through the space. Parents embraced. Hope bloomed like flowers after a long winter. Keisha Williams stood beside her, having left her corporate firm to open a civil rights practice. You know, Keisha said, Marcus Chen sent me a letter. He's left corporate law. Started doing pro bono work with the public defender's office. Rose nodded slowly. People can change. Not all of them. Not even most of them. But some do. And that has to be enough to keep fighting. The golden scales pin on her dress caught the sunlight streaming through the windows. Justice, Rose had learned long ago, wasn't a destination. It was a direction. And as long as people were willing to stand up, speak out, and fight back against those who would abuse power, that direction led somewhere worth going. She looked at the families celebrating around her, at the home they won, at the future they secured, and she smiled. The work was never finished. But today, right now, in this moment, justice had won.